Hi grade 8s, these are the evidence of learning solutions for week 3, lesson 3, squares and rectangles. Now this will mainly be focusing on the area of squares and rectangles, but as a quick review, let's look at the perimeter of a square first. Now, as we can see, with a square, all four sides are equal, as indicated by these four lines here. Now, because the perimeter of a shape is the sum of all of the sides, so adding all of the sides together, if each of the four sides are equal, the perimeter of a square is the same thing as multiplying the side by 4, so 4 times s. And looking at this example here, one of these sides is 3 meters, so our perimeter would be 4 times 3 meters, and so our answer is just 12 meters. Now, because it's not area, we don't have to write 12 meters squared. A perimeter is just a distance, so 12 meters long. Now, looking at the area of a square, the formula we use is side squared. And what that means is side times side. So you don't need to write this next line down, but in case you need a reminder, side squared means side times side. So looking at the example above, 3 meters is our side. So our next line will be 3 meters squared. So 3 meters times 3 meters will be 9 meters squared. And just a reminder, the reason why it's meters squared is because just like 4 times 4 is 4 squared, meters times meters is meter squared. Okay, so that was the perimeter and area of a square. Let's now look at a rectangle. The first thing we'll notice about a rectangle is that we have a long side and a wide side, so the length and the width. And looking at these little dashes here, these lines indicate that the opposite sides are equal. So this top side here is 10 meters, and these two sides here are equal as well, so this right side is 4 meters. So the formula for the perimeter of a rectangle is 2 times the length plus the width. So because we have 2 of the same lengths and 2 of the same widths, all we need to do is add the lengths and widths together and then multiply by 2 to find out the total distance around the outside of the rectangle. So using that specific example above, it's 2 times the length, the long side was 10 meters, plus the width, which was 4 meters. So on our next line, we simplify the brackets. We have 2 times 14 meters, and so our answer will be 28 meters. And once again, it's just a perimeter, so we don't need to use squared units. Our answer is simply 28 meters. Now, using that same rectangle, let's have a look at the area. And the area of a rectangle is quite simple. The formula is just the length of the rectangle times the width. And using that same example, our length was 10 meters and our width was 4 meters. So our answer, very simply, is just 40 meters squared. So those were 2 examples of how to calculate the perimeter and area of squares and rectangles. We're now going to look at some more worked solutions. So looking at question 1, the first thing to identify is that we have a rectangle. The second thing to identify is the length, which is 6 meters, and the width, which is 1 meter. Now we're calculating the area of these shapes. So remembering the formula for the area of a rectangle, area equals length times width. The length of this shape is 6 meters. The width is just 1 meter. So very simply, 6 meters times 1 meter will be 6 meters squared. All right, question 2, we can identify that that is a square because both of these sides are equal, 4 kilometers and 4 kilometers. So using our square formula, area equals the side squared. One of our sides is 4 kilometers, and 4 kilometers squared, which is 4 times 4, will be 16 kilometers squared. So those two are pretty straightforward. These next 2 questions, however, do get a little bit more complicated. So looking at this shape here. Now, this is not a regular rectangle or a regular square. What we need to do first is split this irregular shape into 3 regular shapes that we can calculate the area of. And there are a few different ways that you can do this, but I'm going to drop some vertical lines. Now, the first thing I can do is drop a line going straight down to make one big rectangle on the left here. And the next thing I can do is drop another vertical line going down there. And now I've made a second rectangle here. And also, the very last thing we have is a tiny square on the right. As you can see, we know it's a square because we have 3 millimeters on the top and we have 3 millimeters on the right. Because those are equal, we know that's a square. So now we have 3 different shapes. And to work out the total area, all we need to do is calculate the area of each shape and then add them together at the end. So let's look at the area of our first shape. So area 1. We know that it's a rectangle because we can see that 9 millimeters is the width and 12 millimeters is the length. So we use our formula for a rectangle, length times width. We've got 12 millimeters times by 9 millimeters. And if you know your 12 times tables, 12 times 9 is 108, and our units will be millimeters squared. So that's our first area. Now we can do the same thing for our second area. So area 2. Once again, we know it's a rectangle, so we'll have length times width. Now the length of this shape, so the vertical height of the shape. As we can see on the right, we have 3 millimeters from here to here, and we have another 3 millimeters from there to there. So our total length will be 3 millimeters plus 3 millimeters. So we know the length of that second rectangle is 6 millimeters, and the width is 3 millimeters. So showing our working out, we have 6 millimeters times 3 millimeters, and 6 times 3 is 18, and our units will be millimeters squared. Finally, our last shape, number 3, we already identified that that is a square. So we use our square formula, which was side squared. The side of that square is 3 millimeters. So 3 millimeters squared is 3 times 3, which is 9 millimeters squared. Okay, so we've calculated the area of all 3 of those shapes. Now all we need to do is work out the total area. And the total area is A1 plus A2 plus A3. So we'll have 108 millimeters squared plus 18 millimeters squared plus 9 millimeters squared. And our final answer when we add all of that together is 135 millimeters squared. So the total area of that irregular shape is 135 millimeters squared. And we work that out by breaking the shape into 3 separate shapes, calculating those 3 areas, and then adding them together. Alright, let's look at our last example here, question number 4. Now question 4 is similar to question 3 in that we don't have a regular shape, but the difference here is that instead of adding areas together, we actually need to subtract. So we have 2 blank sections here. We don't want to include this area in the middle here, and we don't want to include that area there because they've both been cut out of the shape. But as we can see, the general shape that we have here is a rectangle. So what we need to do is calculate the area of the whole rectangle and then calculate the area of these smaller bits and subtract them from that total area. So the first thing we'll do is we will calculate the area of the rectangle in total. So we use our formula for the area of a rectangle, which is length times width. Looking at our diagram, we know the length of this rectangle is 25 meters. And the width, once again, is broken up into these 3 sections here. So we have 5 meters, another 5 meters, and another 5 meters. So in total, we have 15 meters for the width. So it will be 25 meters times 15 meters. So in total, the area of that whole rectangle is 375 meters squared. Now our next step is to subtract the area of these 2 red sections. And as we can see, they are both squares with sides of 5 meters. So if we call this first shape area 1, which was the rectangle, we can work out area 2 by using our square formula. And our square formula is side squared. We know that the side of one of those squares is 5 meters, and so our answer will be 5 meters squared, which is 5 times 5, therefore 25 meters squared. Now that's area 2, but it's also area 3, because that third shape is exactly the same. And so we can just simply write area 3 is also 25 meters squared. Now, unlike question 3, where we added them together, in this question we need to subtract area 2 and 3 from our area 1. So our total area this time will be area 1, take away area 2, and take away area 3 as well, which will be 375 meters squared, minus 25 meters squared, minus 25 meters squared again. Or what you could have done is subtracted 50 meters squared by adding those 2 together in the beginning. But either way, you will end up with the same answer, and that answer is 325 meters squared. So that is how you calculate the area and perimeter of squares and rectangles.